Right, let's make a start. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Nasstar PSTN switch off webinar. I'm Dan Wellsmith. I'm one of the account directors at Nasstar, and I'm predominantly responsible for the relationships between some of our public sector, so specifically LRG, councils, local regional government, and some of our housing association customers as well. So there's kind of been a trend over the last few months as I've engaged with customers that PSTN, the switch off, is clearly something that is going to affect all of our customers. And when I speak to customers as well, I'd say they're all at different phases of readiness for the PSTN switch off. There also seems to be quite a lot of fear and uncertainty and doubt out there around what the actual PSTN switch off is, what it entails, when it's going to come about. So we thought this warrants a conversation. So thanks for joining us. And I don't think there's anyone more qualified and better to help us navigate these challenges than Darren. So morning, Darren.
Morning, Dan.
Darren, can you just give a little bit of intro to yourself and what you do at Nasstar and how you fit in?
Certainly, yeah. So Darren Hogan, Director of Portfolio. So I've been with the business about 19 months now. So I work in the portfolio team. So our primary goal is to make sure that we navigate customers through the challenges of adopting new technology, bring new technologies and services to market, and help customers on their journey to achieve their own growth ambitions, their own success ambitions, with a whole portfolio of services and products.
Cool, thank you. And I should also say hi. We've got Voice of God, Rebecca. Are you there, Rebecca?
I am indeed. Good morning.
Thank you. So Rebecca does all the hard work behind the scenes to make sure that these events happen. Also, you can probably see a comments box. If you've got any questions throughout, just type them in. Rebecca's going to receive and triage those questions. She'll share them with us at the end. She'll anonymise them, and then Darren and I will answer those at the end. Right. So start from the top then, Darren. What is PSTN?
So do you know what I love about our industry, Dan? Is the amount of acronyms that we have. Because who doesn't love a good acronym? Why use real words when we can use letters?
Okay, yeah.
So PSTN, Public Switch Telephone Network, been around for decades here in the UK. It is the primary medium and the fundamental resource that we've used for 60, 70, 80 years to be able to send and receive messages and make telephone calls. So owned and operated by Openreach and BT. It is the primary medium of communications. Everybody knows pick up a handset, there's the dial tone at the other end, and that's the network telling us that the network is ready for a call. Typically, copper line coming into a premise that terminates on an NCU. In very simple terms, plug a phone handset into that. Previously analog, now digital telephony handsets that we use to make and receive phone calls. The switching infrastructure at the heart of the PSTN is based on legacy. Currently legacy, well, was legacy, now is IP based, but was legacy TDM routing and switching, all prefix based. So local geographies, 01274 for Bradford, for example. If I phone that prefix, I get through to Bradford, and it's the switching infrastructure within the PSTN network that makes all that happen. So that is the topic of conversation for today. The public switch telephone network not only carries voice traffic, but also data traffic as well. So if we think about the history of 9600 baud modems, 14.4, 28.8, then 56k V90 modems, I remember faithfully rolling out a service that you might recall called FreeServe back in 1998, 99. I was part of the engineering team, worked for a company called Planet Online, and we went up and down the country installing these modems that people would use to dial up and access the internet. And we've come a long way since then, haven't we, in terms of connectivity speeds? Carries voice, carries data, but is currently legacy.
Got you. And this is a lot of the equipment is in these big exchanges, those buildings we see dotted around.
Exactly, yeah. So back to my story about FreeServe. So when we were installing these modem racks, AS5300 modem racks, I remember them very well, size of the video recorder, and put racks and racks of them in these switching sites. And I remember looking around and thinking, what are all these lines and lines of rows of telecommunications equipment, DMS 100 switching infrastructure, and it was the quarter of the size of a football pitch, this stuff, right? And I remember thinking, well, goodness me, how much power is it consuming? You know, how much time does it take to maintain? And those are some of the triggers, I think, from a sustainability perspective, why Openreach have taken the decision to start retiring the service and move on to more modern IP-based variants.
Okay, fine. So when we look at some of our customers, whether it's a council or a housing association, what are some of the services? So I guess the obvious ones would be phone lines.
Yeah,
they're predominantly supported by the PSTN network.
correct. Yeah.
What are the services and things do you think that might be supported by this network?
Yeah, so if we think about traditional telephony, so that we've discussed recently or briefly, another little known supported service, because the PSTN carries a voltage, you can actually plug devices into the PSTN. So things like
it powers them.
Yeah, it powers them, exactly. So lift alarms, door access systems, CCTV, EPOS machines, all of those kind of devices and instruments take advantage of that very, very small voltage on the PSTN. It's not only just telephony and ADSL based data services. Also, some of those devices will be impacted as well. So, the blast radius can be quite large.
Yeah, I see. And you mentioned this has been around for 60, 70 years.
Yeah, exactly that. So, aging infrastructure. And if we think about not just that kind of infrastructure, but things like ISDN2, ISDN30, all of those traditional dedicated telephony services are impacted by this. If you imagine how much it costs to maintain an old car, you can start to think about how much it's going to cost to maintain this infrastructure that's 60, 70, 80 years old. And the only way that a provider will be able to sustain that is to pass the cost on to the customer. So obviously that's not viable, hence the reason why Openreach are making this decision.
Yeah, when I was doing my research for this topic, I read an interesting story. It was about, you probably don't remember, but back in the days when you used to have switchboards that were run by an operator, and you used to pick up the phone and you say, can you put me through to this person? There's a funeral director, and he noticed that he had a massive drop off in inbound calls coming from the operators. He looked into this and he soon learned that his the wife of the rival funeral director's business was now working in the local switchboard. So she was just routing all the calls through to her husband's switchboard instead, her husband's business instead.
Oh, right.
Upset by this, he basically apparently then went on to help develop some of the technology that we have today that allows us to automatically route and switch calls. I don't know how true that is. It's just something I read. I thought it was quite interesting,
isn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
But to summarise then, PSTN is a physical copper-based service that predominantly allows customers to make and receive telephone calls. But it can provide a service to anything that needs some form of data connectivity.
Yeah, so data connectivity as well could be impacted.
Okay, fine. So I don't know how long I've had a house phone now, probably 25 years. But every time I've picked up that house phone, it works. It seems incredibly reliable. I don't get issues with signal. I don't get issues with flat battery, things like that. It seems like an incredibly robust service. We started touching on it, but why are we switching this off?
Yeah, so the predominant driver really is the maintenance of this infrastructure, and there are real benefits to migrating from traditional dedicated based PSTN telephony and data solutions to more fiber based, more dedicated bandwidth based IP solutions in the future. So if we think about the availability of internet connectivity now, it's very, very pervasive, and the ability for us to be able to use that internet connectivity to be able to send and receive phone calls, but also look at our productivity applications and putting all of that on a single set of infrastructure and consolidating that down is very attractive. In terms of the switch off itself, Openreach announced back in 2017 that they were going to start to phase out the PSTN, and that feels like a rare event, and it is indeed a rare event. So an industry-led wholesale shift from one technology, traditional PSTN, to another IP-based technology is monumental and far-reaching. And the way that Openreach are phasing this, so it's not going to be a big bang and turn everything off on.
They said December
25. Yeah,
that's when they hope to have the last of it done by.
Yeah, exactly. So 21 months away.
Yeah.
They're phasing the close down across a number of exchanges, all the exchanges across the UK. it's important to note there are two phases to this. So the first phase is that depending on geography, if I'm a customer and I'm taking a PSTN service, my local exchange will serve my PSTN service. And Openreach are targeting the exchanges to do the first phase, which is end of sale.
Okay, right.
So what that means is that if I'm currently contracted to have a PSTN service that runs out in 10 months time, 9 months time, at that point I will no longer be able to recontract for that service for another 12 months because it's going to be end of sale. I can no longer buy it. It's not on the shelf.
So if you're in contract, it's probably not going to be just switch stuff.
No, correct. Yeah, exactly. But if you then, if we then marry that up with the end of sale and end of life announcement, so the end of life announcement follows the end of sale. So if I could no longer contract for it, then I've got until my contract ends. At that point, I will not be able to buy a WLR3 PSTN service. So wholesale line rental 3 is the set of products that serve this need.
Okay.
Those are the products that are going to be withdrawn. I can't buy a PSTN service, so I have to buy an alternative.
Yeah.
So then you're looking at IP voice-based services, hosted PBX, and then SAGIA, FTTP if it's available. FTTC is still viable, but then you need to change out the voice service. So the point in time is really now to start thinking about this.
Yeah.
We don't want customers to get to the end of that contracting period and say, well, actually, I can't renew my service.
Yeah, I see.
What do I do? The service will still work,
Yeah.
but that's the point in time to really start thinking about it, I think. So end of sale and then end of life.
And it's a phased approach.
Phased approach across the UK.
Got you. And how would I know, outside of knowing that I can't recontract, how would I know if I'm the target for the next phase of the PSTN show?
Yeah, it's a good question. So lean heavily on the provider for that service. So the provider, if it's a resold service, the provider will be able to talk to BT or Openreach to see which particular exchange that service is being served from.
Got you.
And then map that against the retirement of the service.
Okay.
And that can be complex. If we think about customers that have got multiple services across multiple geographies, that can be quite complex in terms of that mapping exercise. So it's really worth starting that inventory piece first. What are my PSTN services? Where are they delivered from? What's the rollout? What's the timescale for end of life and end of sale? And then start to put together a plan of migration.
Got you. I see. And some of my customers that I speak to, they're confident that this won't happen or that the end date will be postponed.
Yeah. Kicking the can down the road is an attractive option, isn't it? When you look at the body of work that potentially could be involved in trying to move to this new technology. But I guess our advice is this: it's a much better position to be in when we take control of the conversation.
Okay.
So when we take control of the decision making and we work to our own timescales as opposed to betting on Openreach extending the viability of the service for another 6, 12, 18 months. Yeah. And we're only going to be in the same position in 12 months time. So it's really an opportunity to get ahead of the curve, start to put some plans in place, reach out to partners and reach out to service providers such as Nasstar that can start to help to plan that migration strategy. I think it's a big bet to say that Openreach are going to extend and I don't have to worry about it. Get control of the conversation, start to look at that inventory piece.
Right. So let's move on to the impact then. So I live in a little town called Ledbury, which falls under Herefordshire Council. Let's imagine that Herefordshire Council, that they don't take control of this, as you say. We get to the end of 2025. I wake up on the 1st of January 2026. As a citizen of that local council, what does that mean for me? How does my day look different?
Yeah, so let's take that extreme example. So Openreach have stuck by their guns and they've said that we're going to turn services off by the end of 2025. I haven't recontracted for an alternative service. I've just let things run dry. On the 1st of January, you wake up, you pick up the phone in your office or your home, and there's no dial tone.
Okay.
So you can't make and receive phone calls now. Obviously, there are mobiles to be able to do 999 and things like that, but
it's inconvenient.
It's inconvenient, exactly that. Yeah. And from that point on, it's terribly difficult because let's take your example. So your customer has picked the phone up and there's no dial tone, or there is a loss of service somehow that's unpredicted. The recovery from that is extremely difficult because you then have to stand in line in a queue to your service provider to try and look at an alternative solution very, very quickly. That could involve a number of things. It could involve physical recabling or wiring work. From a data perspective, it might involve new hardware if we're looking at faster speeds.
Yeah.
It might involve porting a number away from an existing provider into another one if you're looking at taking on a new voice over IP provider. But I think that's the devil in the detail. The porting process for numbers can be quite long, based on the losing provider and the gaining provider. So it's really important to get hold of that conversation early. If you don't, you're going to be standing in a queue with your provider saying, well, I need a voice over IP service and I need a Sagia line and I need it yesterday because I've got people on a switchboard sat doing nothing.
Okay.
And I've got people walking into a local borough council office saying, what's happened. Get ahead of that conversation, and that timescale is going to be elongated because you're in a queue with everybody else.
Okay.
So really extreme example, but
No, that makes sense. That sort of addresses my concern, my home phone, those kinds of things. I'm thinking a bit more broader as I engage with society. Could it be that I go into town and traffic lights aren't working, building management systems aren't working? Are there other potential knock-on?
Yeah, there are potential knock-ons. So any service that uses readily available copper PSTN services for data transfer, or for phoning home for some reason in terms of telemetry, if those services are not replaced with IP-based variants and well ahead of time, then there could be a disruption.
Okay.
And I think if we zoom back into our analysis of those services like door access control systems, fire, lift alarms, EPOS systems, those are some of the periphery items that potentially aren't readily in view, but they again could be impacted. Not being able to take payments, not being able to secure a building, those are the things that, if left unchecked, could readily come into view if action isn't taken.
Got you. So at one end of the scale, then we have these inconvenience factors: phones not working, citizens going into offices trying to get answers about council tax, whatever it be. At the other end of the scale, I guess councils maybe need to think about, vulnerable citizens or people in social care who might have 24/7 phone lines or fall alarms and things like that.
Yeah, exactly that. And the reason that I keep coming back to the fact that this is a really rare event is that I think it's probably the only time, certainly my working in this industry in 30 or long years, that there's been a wholesale shift from such a readily available consumer commodity service to a new variant, and everybody has to take action.
Yeah. Okay.
So and these sort of things that aren't in the they're in the periphery, which is why the inventory is so important.
So all my customers are going to be affected by this. Every council we engage with, every housing association. During my research on this, I've not found any central government grants or support or anything that's ring-fenced or designed to help with this. Is there anything of? Or?
No, not that we're aware of. So this is a industry-led, OpenReach-led initiative. It's government sanctioned. There's no government levy or government grants that allow or help, to our knowledge, people transfer to this new technology.
Fine, that makes sense. Okay, so basically, if we do nothing about this, we're almost certainly going to lose the ability to make and receive phone calls on those services that use the legacy equipment. Legacy broadband won't work, and it's going to lead to a loss of services in other areas that might be anything from marginally trivial, possibly to catastrophic. But we're hoping that things are mostly at
exactly
the inconvenient end of things. Okay, fine. That's interesting. So I guess now we move on to the what can we do about it. So let's imagine I'm responsible for this. So I'm a stakeholder. I have to make decisions around services within my council that affect citizens and internal stakeholders. And I'm sat here listening to this. Where do I begin? And what's the minimum I should do about this?
Yeah. So and again, the body of work shouldn't be underestimated. But I guess our recommendation is that it comes back to figuring out what the blast radius is. So, and that comes back to figuring out what services do I have that are going to be impacted at what date and are carrying which critical services.
Yeah.
So that's an internal assessment, and that's an internal mapping exercise and partners, and we can certainly help that through discovery workshops and innovation sessions. But it's understanding the blast radius. Once we understand which telephony services and which data services and which ancillary services around the edge, so powered devices, are impacted, then we can take an assessment of what do we need to attack and what replacement technology do we start to need to consider. Now, I'm going to put a pin in that because we talk about the bare minimum.
Yeah.
And I think there is a path of least resistance answer to this, which is to replace PSTN telephony services with voice over IP solutions.
Okay.
So whether that's a hosted PBX solution, which we can help with, whether that's a cloud-based contact center solution, again, we can help with that. Or it's a very simple, I need a voice over IP solution, and also data. So SAGIA, FTTP if it's available, FTTC, G.fast, SOG.fast. There are a number of different solutions to those 2 point problems of data and voice. However, if we're migrating all of our telephony services from dedicated PSTN infrastructure onto our IP network, we must make sure that we are capacity managing that network properly. And what that means is, if you think about an ISDN2 or an ISDN30, that's dedicated channels for voice. I know that I can make 30 concurrent calls on an ISDN30. And it'll be fine. And it'll be fine. If I take that to the IP network, then we now have a lot of competing priorities on the network. So I've got voice traffic, I've got data traffic, I might have voice and video, I might have critical applications, I might have sensitive information that requires encryption. So yes, you can say, right, I've got this many users and therefore I need this speed of connection. But I think it really is the opportunity to take a step beyond that and start to think, well, if I'm putting all of my voice traffic on my IP network, then what does my cloud consumption profile look like? How am I trying to move towards Microsoft 365 and because all of that traffic is going to use the same base connectivity infrastructure. So yes, you can do path of least resistance and replace like for like almost, but I really would implore customers to start to think about it more holistically in terms of what else we're going to ask the network to do, and then design the network and the solutions appropriately.
Okay, fine. So just hold that thought for a minute. So basically, as a summary, at the very minimum, what we're saying is existing services, they'll need to be converted to some kind of IP-based solution.
Correct.
What that looks like in practice, I don't know. You'll also need to consider power because obviously IP.
So powered devices won't be served by an IP-based telephony solution.
But the starting point is a discovery session. Sit down with a trusted partner, spend a bit of time, understand what have we got today. What's the blast radius, as you say? How is this going to impact us? Sounds like it's going to be incredibly challenging to find every single PSTN line everywhere.
Absolutely, because data is it's sometimes difficult to find. Sometimes legacy records exist, and we've actually been through this ourselves. So, as part of our internal transformation, we're a national carrier. We have millions of minutes transferring through our voice network today. And we have undertaken the challenge of taking all our traditional TDM capability and migrating to IP.
It's
taken us 2 years to do that. And coming back to the sustainability, the power savings are astronomical. I mean, 6 figures per annum.
And that's just for us.
That's just for us. Yeah. So, but we've had to do, through thread and needle, line by line, look at the services that we are providing and provide IP-based alternatives. So we've been through that pain at a provider level. So we're well versed to start to look at that from a customer perspective as well.
So just come back to the opportunity saying, so I think there are 2 things at play here. We've obviously got the government have got a public cloud first strategy.
Exactly.
And it feels that coupled with this PSTN switch off, that feels like an opportunity to rather than replace like for like, as you say, really start to change and transform how we deliver services both internally and to our citizens.
Yeah, exactly. So let's just dwell on that for a second. So when we talk about public cloud transformation for healthcare services, we're talking about HSCN, which was the replacement for M3. Providing patient records and patient data for LRGs. So that is the HSCN is a kind of walled garden of applications and connectivity. And NHS England have been saying for a number of years now that they are encouraging application providers to re-platform those services in public cloud, make them available over the internet. So rather than have a dedicated HSCN connection, which is what happens today, have those services available across the public internet. Now, they're still
not caring about how it's connected to the internet.
So it'll be incumbent upon the provider or the service partner to make sure that there is secure connectivity, to make sure that it's encrypted traffic, to make sure that there are zero trust principles like least privilege access to those applications. Now, this is a chicken and egg situation because you have providers over here who are providing services through the HSCN. And then you have public cloud services over here, Azure, AWS, GCP, etc. And you have consumers of the service, which are people that work in local regional government who are accessing healthcare services. So who goes first? So the application has to move to public cloud in order for the change in architecture to happen to point users towards the new location. And it's an interesting, it's a larger conversation, but it's an interesting one because there might be some technical reasons why the current infrastructure, the HSCN dedicated infrastructure, can't provide access to the new public cloud provided applications. And there's an interesting opportunity here to try and design for that so that you're future-proofing your connectivity for that instance, as well as dealing with the PSTN switch off. And we can get into more detail in one of the discovery sessions around that, but that's just a point to note, really. Okay,
fine. So it sounds like the opportunities are delivering more secure services where they're needed.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if you extend that, so security, we talked briefly about zero trust, having the right people accessing the right applications, making sure that credentials are managed appropriately through identity access management solutions, and trying to take the customers on a journey where they leverage more of what they're already using. So if you think about Microsoft licensing and Teams, Microsoft Teams, we're using Microsoft Teams today. There is an opportunity to start to leverage some of that licensing and start to put Microsoft Teams, make Microsoft Teams PSTN capable, so Teams direct routing.
Because if that sounds great, loads of customers that they're already investing in a lot of these Microsoft services.
Exactly.
They just don't know or they're not using it.
Exactly right. So it's a tweak and maybe an incremental uplift rather than a wholesale change. To start to put dial tone into your Teams client. So rather than have a physical phone, you have a dial pad within your Teams client from your laptop. You hit go, you can dial a landline anywhere in the world, and it'll just work. And obviously that gives rise to mobility of workforce, being able to access these telephony services anywhere. But then how do you secure that? So there's a whole conversation there around zero trust access and making the mobile workforce secure as well. But putting dial tone into Teams is many of our customers are taking the opportunity to do that.
That makes sense. Okay, so there's loads of opportunities to transform services. So what would you encourage the people watching to do next?
Yeah, I think it's that discovery piece, really. We can't labour it enough. I think it's a mistake potentially to kick this down the line and wait for an extension from Openreach that may never happen. Understand what the blast radius is. Understand what we have today. Do that inventory piece, but then couple that with where we're going as an LRG, where we're going from a citizen, relationship perspective, how we're trying to improve services. One of the things that I was thinking about when we were planning this webinar is everybody's talking about artificial intelligence. It's the latest buzzword. We've all got Copilot on our laptops in terms of preview, and the ability from a contact center perspective, artificial intelligence to start to pull out sentiment analysis to understand when a citizen calls in and is not pleased with the service, linking that sentiment to the topic of conversation, and then performing analysis to say, well, actually 80% of the citizens are phoning in because their bins haven't been collected or the council tax has gone up, and it's providing that rounded insight to be able to improve the citizen experience through the power of technology. So we started there with the PSTN switch off, we ended up with artificial intelligence, but I think understanding where we're trying to get to from a cloud consumption perspective, from a productivity application perspective, is really important, because we're going to ask the network to take care of all of that for us and just expect it to do it. So starting where we are now in terms of the blast radius and the inventory, where's the future look like, and then building a plan of transformation to try and get from A to B within our gift, within our control, within our timescale.
Fine. So spend some time with us and we can hold their hand through that.
Absolutely right. We've done it ourselves internally, so
it's not our first rodeo.
Not our first rodeo. Absolutely.
I was told to not use that phrase. I'm sure I'm going to get told off.
Yeah, I'm sure you also.
Rebecca, just as a side note, have we had any questions come in?
Sorry, it was just turning off my mic. We've had a couple come in. Do you want them now or all at the end?
Yeah, I think we can take them now. There's just one slide that we potentially just want to go through.
Do you want to do the slide first?
Yeah, we can do. Yeah, Rebecca, do you want to just share the one slide that we have? So on the screen, this is just a very basic diagram of what we've talked about the roadmap of what the future looks like, and we've put together a number of services that we can bring to bear to be able to bring that future vision to life from a technology perspective. So we've got the IP-based services on the left-hand side. I've incorporated some software-defined wide area networking logos here, because if we're talking about trying to make the best use of bandwidth and trying to protect and trying to look at user experience when consuming unified communications, then that is an option. That is a tool that we can use to be able to aggregate bandwidth and cater for, Perry thought one of the circuits going down at SD-WAN gives us that visibility and that orchestration and control. But this is typically what we see customers sort of undertaking from a journey perspective. So on the left-hand side, we have, remote users, we have branch users, and we have HQ users using our infrastructure really to be able to transport the data from the user into the cloud platform. And we've put, three cloud platforms there on the right-hand side. And we can provide connectivity, dedicated connectivity, to make sure that the user experience is maximised at every point. So in terms of a vision of what UC might look like, there are many other aspects to this in terms of managing cloud and managing, aspects to do with zero trust network access around identity, etc., etc. But from a basic perspective, drawing lines and pictures on a diagram, this could be one example of how we could bring those technology solutions to bear.
And you mentioned we have relationships with OpenReach, Virgin, TalkTalk.
Yeah, exactly. So we are a virtual network operator in our own right. So from a commercial perspective, we've got eyes on all of the pricing from all of those particular providers. And we do cost analysis based on which providers provides the best price and the best reach and the best availability and the best service. So we provide that data.
We're covered for most use cases.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly that.
Cool. Thank you. So Rebecca, we'll take some questions now.
Okay, so we've had a few come in, so we'll start from the top. You've talked about the opportunity to move to cloud for UC services and voice services, but what if I need to maintain control of my on-premise infrastructure in the short term?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we will have customers right now who manage and maintain their own on-premise PBX, private branch exchange infrastructure. So the call control actually sits at the local branch or in a third-party data center. So we have services today that we run for customers where we manage that infrastructure on behalf of the customer. So specifically around PBX or session border controllers, another element of call control, we can provide managed SBCs as a service, both from a point solution perspective, but also from a transformation perspective. So understanding what call control, what features are available at that particular point in time from a technology perspective, and then providing a migration strategy. So if having call control and availability and from a compliance perspective, having that control under a customer's governance in a physical location that is mandated, then that's absolutely something that we can manage and we can develop.
Okay, thanks for that. So let's move on to the next one. And I know that we talked about some of the cost savings that we've experienced here at Nasstar, but the question we have is, are there any cost savings in migrating to new infrastructure in the wake of the PSTN switch off?
Yeah, that's a good one as well. So we talked about the virtual network operator model that we have. So we have access to a dozen or so carriers that we constantly compare prices against, so that we can provide the best pricing and the best availability from a circuit perspective. But also, we touched on this earlier, there is the opportunity to get more bang for our buck in terms of bandwidth. So connectivity generally is continuing to come down in terms of price per meg and per gig per second. But often that leads onto a conversation around well, we need to upgrade infrastructure in order to take advantage of the speed of that connection around on-premise routers, or CPEs we call them. And from a number of locations perspective, that can start to seem quite daunting from a CapEx point of view. We have to upgrade all of these routers. So what we're looking at doing is developing behind the scenes the concept of an as a service model for connectivity. So rather than have customers have to look at a significant capital outlay before we can even start to take advantage of this technology, we're starting to look at ways that we can deliver the same technology but have a per user per month subscription model with no capital outlay. And that's something that we're working on the commercial proposition but behind the scenes. And I guess I'm really interested from a portfolio perspective to talk to customers who might think that will be an attractive option for them. So there's the opportunity to potentially do some right sizing and cost saving around connectivity, but also minimizing and smoothing out that capital outlay if we do need to upgrade or replace routers to take advantage of the newer speeds.
Fantastic, thanks, Darren. I've got another question here. We know migration to the cloud is coming, but no decisions have yet been made on cloud providers or applications to be moved as yet. How flexible are some of the options you're suggesting?
Yeah, very flexible. So we saw in the diagram actually that we had a number of different cloud providers connected to our infrastructure. So we have agreements and relationships with all the main cloud providers and hyperscalers, Microsoft, GCP.
I think most councils I deal with are predominantly
Microsoft. Yeah, exactly. So but depending on the cloud provider, we can provide connectivity. But from a flexibility perspective, absolutely. So we operate on a model whereby we have specific connectivity options for specific connectivity types based on the number of users, and we will build a solution based on that. So from a cloud consumption perspective, from a connectivity perspective, having those applications sort of on net to the customer is how we describe it. So rather than going over the internet potentially for a consumption of a service, we can provide private dedicated connectivity through our network. So yeah, I think we're
cloud agnostic.
Pretty cloud agnostic, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I have a couple of connectivity-based questions that have come in. Okay. So here's the first one. We have several local government customers who have perfectly functioning FTTC connections. They do not use the underlying PSTN number at all for anything, and it only exists because ordering the PSTN line with the FTT service was the only option available at the time the service was originally ordered. When the switch off happens, will their FTTC line continue to function and the analog voice service just stop, or will they have to be moved to another service type like Sogea beforehand?
So if the PSTN service is part of if there is a PSTN service on the FTTC line, then that will stop working. But from what the users described, there isn't. So they're purely using that FTT service for connectivity, then they will be unaffected by the PSTN switch off. The only services that are going to be affected are telephony services using that FTTC connection. So if there is no numbering attached to the FTTC service, then they should be unaffected by the switch off.
Okay, I have a follow-up question to that. Can we convert an existing PSTN FTTC line to Sogea? There is no more copper line capacity at these locations in order to provide an alternative service in tandem with an existing one.
We'll have to take that away. I think it's largely dependent on the infrastructure at the local exchange. The typical way to do this would be a cease and reprovide, but if there's no capacity at the exchange, then that sounds like it might be a challenge. What we'll do, Rebecca, is we'll take note of that, and then we'll go back into the business and ask the technical experts potentially at a local exchange level to see what we can come up with in terms of an answer.
I've got the contact details for the person that's asked this one, so we'll come back to you individually on that one.
Absolutely.
Another connectivity-based question for you. What is the recommendation where installing Sogea or fibre are difficult as not available due to geographical restrictions, for example, a country park? What options are available, 4G, etc., or are there analog converters?
So if there is no option to put a hardwired fixed line next generation IP service to GIA, G.fast, fiber, or if FTTC is not an option, then we are looking at cellular data services in terms of 4G, 5G, dependent on coverage. Again, depending on availability, there are microwave services available that's strictly location based. So you'd be looking at a point-to-point service potentially, and we have partners that can provide that level of service. The low Earth orbit satellite potentially, Starlink type services could be an option. Depends on geography, depends on the requirements of bandwidth, what services are to be consumed. I'm just thinking about SD-WAN. You would need so what we have provided in the past is we've provided cellular data services as a backup to a fixed line, but that doesn't help in this particular situation because there's no fixed line option. It feels like if there are no other options, it feels like cellular, microwave, or potentially low Earth orbit, depending on requirements.
Fantastic. We can always have a further dig into
Absolutely.
that one and provide some more information. A couple of non-connectivity based questions for you now. What is the best way of me assessing that wider impact of switch off? So Darren, you called it the blast radius, I think.
Yeah.
So understanding what else will be affected other than just the phones, for example.
Okay. So the source of truth here is the provider. So if we understand from a customer perspective, if we understand whose invoice we're paying, who we're paying for services, then we can start to interrogate those partners. We shouldn't be paying for a service that we're not consuming, so everything should be on an invoice somewhere that we can start to potentially look at. Potentially an exchange map that we could potentially help with to understand again what other ancillary services. It's difficult because without going into the detail and figuring out, well, we have multiple buildings and we might have some alarms or CCTV or whatever. It's difficult, but the invoice is usually the source of truth because despite people's best efforts, keeping data records up to date off tooling on Excel spreadsheets, for example, is best effort at best. If we're paying for a service, then it potentially will be impacted by the switch off. So it will be the provider that we're paying the invoices to, backed up by potentially some exchange work based on the region that we're taking services from.
I guess if they speak to us as well, we can sort of direct them and arm them with the kind of questions that they can go and ask their provider.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
Sorry, Becca.
No, that's great. I think we've got time for one last question. What challenges do you expect government organisations to face when preparing for this switch off, and how can they build a readiness plan?
Yeah, so I think we've discussed that throughout this webinar, haven't we? It's the main key points are get ahead of the curve, make sure that we understand the services that we're consuming, and that could be tricky, which is why it's important to get ahead of the curve. The readiness plan for me is in two phases. So there's what's the least resistance? What do I need to do just to keep my services working? And that's the replacement of services to IP voice-based variants and faster speeds potentially using other technologies. But then the really important gift of all this, if you can call it a gift, a wholesale turn off of a technology like PSTN, is that future proofing. It would be a missed opportunity, I think, to at least not look at where we're trying to go to from a citizen awareness perspective. How am I serving the citizens more fully and roundedly? Thinking about off the top of my head, from a contact center perspective, omni-channel contact center. You know, we have an aging population, obviously, but we have, you know, younger citizens and younger residents that still need to interact with local and regional government, and understanding how omni-channel contact centers through text and WhatsApp and other mediums can start to engage with those new citizens is an opportunity, and the PSTN affords us that. The switch off affords us the opportunity to look at that new technology. So understand what we have, understand whether or not we're just going to go for a basic, you know, like for like, but then really look at that fuller model and build a transition from where we are now to what that future state looks like.
Thanks, Darren. And I'm right in saying that we can help our customers with that through one of these innovation sessions and look at the art of the possible, if you like. What are the options available?
Yeah, and I think what I'd encourage customers to do when we come to these innovation and discovery sessions is it's really easy to focus on the technology challenge and the technology pain point, which is the PSTN switch off. But let's remember to obviously bring that to the table, but also what's, you know, keeping you awake at night almost. You know, is it cost, is it security, is it you know, patient health, you know, well-being, is it, you know, what's keeping our customers awake at night? Because those are the kind of things that can unlock, you know, the future state conversations that we can have. You know, it would be satisfactory to walk in a room and then fix the PSTN switch off problem, but it would be a much better outcome with everybody around the table with invested in the challenge to try and build towards that future state of what does good look like from a local and regional government perspective.
Fantastic. Well, we're just about at time there. Is there anything else that you want to kind of finish off on, really?
Yeah, firstly, thank you, Darren. Thank you. I think it's been a fascinating session. I've learned a lot, and I hope the people who've tuned in have got something to take away from this as well. Rebecca, thanks for making this happen. And to any of you watching, absolutely love to hear from you. If you've got any feedback on the session, or, you know, if you want to spend some time with some of the experts like Darren to help you understand the impact of PSTN switch off for you and some of the things that you can do about it, then we'd absolutely love to hear from you. But thanks everyone, I've really enjoyed the session, learned a lot from it, and yeah, hope to hear from you and speak to you all soon.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Cheerio. I think we're still live.